Say hello, John Kane here, and I welcome you to Let's Talk Native on this Saturday, March 21st, 2020, the year that is, I guess. While this program may not provide a path to spiritual enlightenment, we do encourage and in some cases start conversations. We kind of break rules for Native radio here. We don't do prayers. We don't do buffalo speeches. We aren't into the whole mystical thing. We take a tough look at history, oppression, and survival. We talk about culture, the arts, politics, and identity. And we do step on a few toes along the way. But our real goal here is to bring people together by breaking down what separates us. We will take on the false narratives and provide critical thinking to all that's heaped upon us. And we do it all right here live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. So let's talk Native. But first, let me remind people that our audio streams live on our website, which is www.letstalknative.com. We stream live video of this show via Facebook Live on our Facebook group page and many other pages as well. We take the audio and we put it up on SoundCloud, which puts it out on your favorite podcast platforms. And we take the video and we put it up on our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. I encourage you to subscribe to our podcast by searching Let's Talk Native with John Kane podcast. And I encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hey, I do want to say, I'm patting myself on the back. I know it's a little self-serving, but we crossed over the 8,000 mark for members of our Facebook group page, and we're over it far enough. I kid because I thought we could hit 8,000 several times, because even as people join the page, there's a few people who drop off along the way. And I got to tell you, when I first started this group page, I used to, I added almost all the Native people who were my friends. And then I started realizing, not everybody wants to be a part of this thing. And even though you're friends of mine, this may not be, especially if you're not Native, this may not be your thing. And then I encourage a lot of people to add people. So I know a lot of people get added to this group page who not only don't follow any of the postings that are on there or the shows, but if you do, probably see some things that you don't really care for. So, look, I don't care if people drop off the page. But we're probably far enough above 8,000 that we're not going to lose that many. So I think we're at 8,000. Next 9,000 or bust, I guess, is our next goal. And, again, I do hope that those of you who are on the page, who are active on the page, you look at, follow the shows, perhaps you post some things yourself. I hope you do add the friends of yours who you think will benefit from such a page. And, and again, just like in my opening, we don't do prayers and buffalo speeches. So there's a lot of things that get posted on my page that I take down. I don't, there's other pages for prayer circles and national days of prayer and a lot of the religion stuff. There's a lot of other pages for that. And so I don't, and including Trump videos or Cuomo videos, unless he's specifically talking about Native people, there's a ton of other pages for that stuff. So I take a lot of that stuff down so the Native content can be there, and not because I don't see some of those other posts, but not everything has to be on the Let's Talk Native page. So I just wanted to say that. Don't take offense if you post something and I take it down. I'll usually leave something up for a while, even if I don't necessarily care for what's been posted. But there's some things that I think are either very, very self-serving, or they send a different message than what the purpose of the page is. So anyway, I want to say that. All right. I am John Kane. I'm the show's host and producer. I'm joined in studio by Jake Proud. Yes, we are 6 feet away from each other. We've got social distancing going on. He does manage the audio and the video for our podcast and for our video link. So let's get into it. Before I get into the main topic, which I want to talk about, which has to do with trying to put what is happening into a perspective as it relates to nature, as opposed to wrath of God, karma, payback, is a bitch kind of stuff. No, I'm trying to move away from that. So I want to have a conversation about what nature does. And what nature does on its own, even as nature ebbs and flows and deals with the natural tensions of nature, and what nature does because man has a tendency to resist, reject, and defy nature. So I'll get into that. But first, let me talk about some numbers here. And I got a website that I use, and it's a worldometer. If you've never heard of it, it's Worldometer. And that's where I get a lot of some of this real time stuff on what's happening. Just to give some numbers and put it in perspective, because I know some of you are watching the news, but they don't always give you, all the information. Right now, there's 306,000 people, confirmed cases that have occurred. Of those, people have died, and people have recovered, but there's about 200,000 people right now who are actively infected by this disease. So that's globally. Now you get into the where does the United States rank? I mean, I know all you we're number one fans, USA. Well, you're not number one yet. You're number 3. Only China and Italy have more cases of the coronavirus, COVID-19, than the United States. The United States, a couple of days ago, in fact, I meant to mention on my show in New York, I was going to say, well, the United States passed France and Iran. Well, now they've passed Germany and Spain. And so, but I will say, if you're looking for we're number one thing, the United States is number one on new cases. They had more new cases in the last 24 hours than any other country in the world, including Italy. Italy had a lot, and they had a lot, especially considering their country so much smaller. Keep in mind, the United States is the 3rd most populated country on the planet. They are 1 billion people shy of both China and India. But I'm going to tell you, I think the United States is going to pass. Right now, again, China's got 81,000. Italy has 53,575 cases. And the United States has 26,111. My guess is the United States will not only pass Italy. Frankly, I think Italy is going to pass China. I think they're going to pass China and Italy. And I think for a while, United States is going to be number one. Yeah, I know it's not number one what you want to, but you know what? As a native person, well, there you go. You get to be on the top of a list you don't want to be on top of. So the United States, I think, will top the 81,000 cases. Right now, China's actually had a couple of days that they added no new cases. Now, we can debate whether those numbers really reflect the entire 1.4 or 1.5 billion Chinese people, whether it does or doesn't. I'm just saying these are confirmed cases. Now, on that idea of confirmed cases, so when I say the United States has 26,111 confirmed cases, let me be clear. That is only the people who have been tested and came back tested positive. The United States has barely tested, but they barely put a dent in the U.S. population. I mean, they really have. I mean, the percentage of again, the United States, 330 million people. 330 million people, and I don't know if they've gotten more than I remember seeing the last numbers, but we're talking about less than 100,000 people. 100,000 people have been tested, and so it's not that many people. Maybe I'll take it back. It might be 150,000 people is the number that I saw, but that's a small percentage of 330. Many people. It's a pretty small number. So there's a long way to go. Now, on that, I've got to tell you, when I hear Trump or Cuomo, so the president of the United States or the governor of New York, saying, don't be alarmed by the spike in the numbers. That spike is due, and I've heard them say only, but due only because of the increased testing. That's not true. There is no evidence to suggest that testing is outpacing the spread of this disease. In fact, it's unlikely that testing is that more people are being tested than the disease is spreading. So the reason this is going to spike is, yes, it's going to spike in terms of confirmed cases because of testing, but not because the disease isn't spreading. So if anybody suggests, oh, the numbers are going up, but the disease isn't spreading, that's simply not true. There's no evidence to suggest that there isn't a mass spread of this disease still. And look, I know everybody's, confined to quarters and that kind of stuff. But sorry, it came a little bit too late. When I see numbers like even here in Western New York, I see one case in North Collins. You can't convince me that one person in North Collins hasn't infected anybody else. It may be just one, or that one person in Evans, Angola, which is, again, another town real close to where we live here.
182,000 people have been tested.
Okay, 182,000 people have been tested. So, that number is going up. And look, one good news on the testing front, apparently they did develop, a company developed a test that can spit out a result in 45 minutes. And that's huge. That means that, there is going to be a big spike because they're going to start testing people and they're going to provide this equipment to, all over the country. So there's going to be a lot more testing. But I'll tell you, the part of the thing that's a little scary is when you see that at this point, there are still more deaths coming from this virus in the United States than recoveries. So if I look at this again, I got this website. Here's this. To date, in the United States, there's been 324 deaths, and they've got 176 people listed as recovered. Look, that the number of recoveries has to be significantly higher than the number of total deaths before you can say you've turned the corner. Again, for instance, China, they've got listed 81,000 cases. They only are saying that 6,000 are active, 71,000 have recovered, and of course they've got 3,200 people who passed away. I mean, when you see that number when the number of recovery is a lion's share of the total cases and it surpasses the active cases, then you can say you turned the corner. Now, one of the things that I've talked about before and on this, there's a couple of sleeping giants here. There's some countries that have some pretty big populations, like Pakistan, Indonesia, but there's only one country that's even close to the Chinese population, and that's India. I'm going to tell you, when India's numbers start really registering, because I don't think they're testing people, they're hardly testing anybody, and when you consider the conditions that exist both socially, economically, culturally in India, I think India can make China look like a measles outbreak. So while I think the United States is going to overtake both Italy and China in terms of total number of cases and some of the uglier numbers like deaths, I think when all is said and done, India is going to be, it's going to be ground zero. It's going to be the hot spot. I think there were like 1.3 billion people, 1.4 billion people. So they're about. They're less than China, but just barely less than China. If you add China and India together, it's 3 billion people. So, and again, that's 3 billion between those two countries. The United States is 330 million. So you put those numbers in perspective. Like I said, India is like 1.3 billion people. China is about 1.4 and change. They're all about change, but they're close to 3 billion between the two of them. It's pretty scary. Now, if you want to get this in, just since I'm on a roll here, let me go to some of the state numbers, because New York State is starting to really crank some numbers out here. And between New York State and its neighbor New Jersey, it's pretty. We're talking about a lot. We're talking about a lot of people. And New Jersey was actually, I think they for a while they surpassed California. Right now, New Jersey's got 1,300 total cases confirmed. California's got 1,400. Washington State has 1,700, almost 1,800, and New York State's got 12,000 cases. So I expect, since California is the most populated state in the country, I think that I don't think they're going to surpass New York, but I think they're going to, they'll take a solid second. I think they'll surpass Washington State. But the fact that New Jersey, which is essentially New York's neighbor and shares part of the metropolitan area of New York City, New Jersey is still probably a pretty scary place. But anyway, so I wanted to give those numbers out there. I wanted to put some things into perspective. I think it's important that people realize that, yes, you're going to see a spike in the numbers because of testing, but that doesn't mean that the disease isn't spreading. So when you hear the governor of the state of New York saying, don't be alarmed by those numbers. No, be alarmed by those numbers, because there's no evidence to suggest that the disease isn't still spreading way faster than the testing is, it's outpacing the testing. So we'll see. We'll see what happens in a couple of weeks. We're not going to know if all of this shutting down everything, whether it was too late. I suspect that it was later than it should have been. So I think that the numbers are gonna grow significantly. It's my feeling that the numbers are probably 10 times the numbers you're seeing. So if you see a number like 12,000, it's 120,000. If you see a number, like what was the 26,000 for the country, it's probably 260,000. I mean, so we'll I guess time will tell. All right, now let me get to what I want to talk about, because there's a whole lot of people that some want to get into the whole native spirituality thing, and I'm not going there. Some people want to get into the whole maybe karma, which is kind of a Hindu, I guess, thing. This isn't about payback. Here's what happens in nature. Nature has all kinds of tensions. Look, there's blades of grass that compete for sunlight. There's animals that that not only compete for food, but they actually prey on each other. There's a lot of tensions in nature. But there's balance. At some point, and when man throws something out of balance, and I'll give you an example. When wolves were hunted and had bounties on wolves, and the population of wolves were wiped out of Yellowstone, nobody really paid attention because the change happened slowly, but the ecosystem shifted. And when they reintroduced wolves back in, what they found is that greenery came back. Because here's what happened. You took the wolves out. That means that all the ground rodents, they had no more predators. So their population spiked. So they, a lot of these animals eat roots and eat the brush down really, really low, kill a lot of the plants, and there was nothing to hold them in check. So a lot of the greenery ran away. That meant the larger animals that grazed on that stuff, they migrated to greener pastures. Since bringing the wolves back, they've noticed the ecosystem recovered. That the entire, not just the visual of what Yellowstone in these areas look like, but when you, by any measure, the ecosystem recovered and improved. So it had to overcome what man did in the first place by taking the wolves out. Now, man can take credit and say, well, but we brought the wolves back. Well, yeah, but you caused you tipped the scales. And what happens in nature, because you tip the scales, there's an effect. So the ecosystem changes. Now, you could argue that the ecosystem wasn't worse or that it didn't improve when the wolves, but it definitely changed. So in nature, you have a lot of things that there's a delicate balancing act. And that's why when you throw, when you do something, when man does something that defies nature, it can have some devastating effects. There are things in nature that happen that can have, you can have volcanic eruptions. You can have an ash cloud that can, change, massive amounts of an ecosystem. You can have weather patterns that, drought conditions. You can have floods. You can have all kinds of asteroid strikes, whatever. You just ask the dinosaurs, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen that can alter the and see the fact that one thing happens and it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It shows that nature responds. That's why a drought has larger ramifications than just a dry season. It can impact things for decades. So when man does things, dams up rivers, pollutes the water, contaminates the air, removes mountains, to extract minerals, lights off several thousand nuclear weapons just to prove they have them and test them, or drop a couple on a small island nation in the South Pacific or in Asia. Start relying on nuclear power. So, and then have accidents with that, rely to the extent they do on fossil fuels and the contamination that comes from that, CO2, the greenhouse gases, all of that stuff. There's a lot that man does that nature has to compensate for. And I don't mean fix it. I mean it adjusts. Cancer. we all can look at cancer and just loathe the idea, because we've all lost loved ones, and I have too. So we can all hate cancer, but here's the reality. Cancer is not evil. It's neither good nor evil. It just is. But why is it? And why do we see so much of it now? Well, let's be honest here. Man has done plenty, including the nuclear stuff, the things I just listed, and the things that we consume, to have an increase in the prevalence of cancer. Look, we've got bone cancer, we've got blood cancer, we've got lung cancer, we've got cancer of this and cancer of that, throat cancer. We smoke, we chew tobacco, we red dye number 2. Remember all that stuff. And we do so many things. We breathe the air that's contaminated. We do so many things. And then we wonder where cancer came from. We contributed to that. Now, here's the problem. This isn't like nature says, okay, you did this and now you're going to pay for it. No, because it isn't the people responsible for contamination, for pollution, or even the people, sometimes it's not the people who smoke who get lung cancer. It's not the way nature works. Nature doesn't make somebody pay, the guilty party pay for things. But cancer develops. And good people, innocent people, die of these diseases. And it's not just cancer. Look, the plagues that people are so familiar, smallpox, black plague, all these things, they've all been in one way or another. Man contributed to these things, whether it was throwing sewage in the streets of the European cities, whatever the case may be. Now, some of these diseases were also used, so we were all quite familiar with the handing out smallpox blankets. So even though smallpox occurred naturally and may have occurred specifically because of some of man's activities, it also got used. It got used to, Lord Jeffrey Amherst says, we should distribute these infected blankets to the Indians. That way we don't have to kill them. We can claim it's God's will. We'll hand them the blankets and then we'll leave the rest up to God. Yeah, there's that whole line. Now, that's not the only thing. We rarely ever talk about the role that venereal disease and the rape culture of Europe, how much that impacted the population. Now, that's not an innocent transmission of disease. That's a rape culture. So there is that. The other disease, that is somewhat intentional, was tuberculosis. We, by some of the Canadian press accounts, there was as high as a 50% mortality rate, and in some places higher, for Native kids in residential schools, because tuberculosis was allowed, if not encouraged, but allowed to spread amongst the kids. Why? Because we were in the way. So that's what happens sometimes with disease. Now, I realize I haven't once mentioned COVID-19 here. There's a pretty good indication or suggestion, or there's evidence, although it hasn't been completely confirmed, that COVID-19, sometime back in last year, in the fall of 2019, a virus which in all likelihood started with animals, made the leap from not only from animal to man, but then was able to evolve enough so man could transmit it human to human. Now, so where does it come from? Well, much of the theory, I guess, behind this is that there's these huge, what they call wet markets in China. So what's a wet market? Well, a wet market is a open air, sometimes acres of street and road frontage and street frontage, open air markets where animals and livestock, some dead, some like fish, mollusks, chickens, other wildlife that is still, culturally consumed by some of the indigenous people of China. these huge places where all that stuff is brought together. Now, why is it all brought into one place? Well, because one of the things that's happened in China, in fact, throughout the whole world, has been this shift towards people living not in the countryside. For this is the first time in history that more people live in cities than live in rural areas. And China, which has made a real effort to lift people out of poverty, again, through their very authoritarian style governments, one of the things that they encouraged was people leaving the countryside and moving to these urban environments. This Wuhan village or province, whatever you want to call it, has like 6 million people that live within a kind of a metropolitan area. But then the outlying areas, it's almost 60 million. That's a massive population. That's why you have these huge markets. And these things didn't exist in the past, not like this. So you have this clash of people eating some of these indigenous foods that some of them may seem strange to an American. They might seem strange to a European. So if somebody says they eat bats, and I'm not saying they ate a bat and got sick. That's not the way it exactly works. But if they brought all of these animals, some live, some not live, from all different areas, flying animals, land animals, sea animals to this market, you've got quite a mixture. And then throw the diseased people in the mix too. You've got a recipe for something to percolate out of that. And so again, however it happens, out of this Chinese, not little, out of this Chinese urban center, a disease crosses over from animals to human beings. But that's nature. That's not a government conspiracy. It wasn't a weaponized disease. It occurred naturally because of an unnatural scenario where this massive population. It is not natural for there to be 6 million or 10 million like in the New York metropolitan area or 60 million. That's not a natural thing. So when you create an unnatural environment, nature, some things that haven't ever happened in nature before happen. COVID-19, coronavirus. So that's how it happens. Now, look, we're at the bottom of the hour, so I'll take a break. But then I want to talk about, is there a why? Is there a reason? We can get into this whole divine intervention, is there intelligent design? And I want to talk about that in the second half. So let me take a break here, and we'll come back. I'm going to explain how this is not wrath of God stuff. But I'll talk about that when we come back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Thanks for coming back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Hey, I want to thank my sponsors. I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses, Eric White and ERW Enterprises. I want to thank the folks at Grand River Enterprises and the folks at Cat Res for supporting this show and making a contribution on a regular basis that allows us to continue even in the midst of the coronavirus. Without the support that I get from this handful on a regular basis, I wouldn't be able to do what we do here. So I appreciate that. I also want to thank those of you who share the show, who listen to the show and comment and offer your thoughts, both positive and your criticisms. I appreciate those too. I really do. But I want to thank you guys for participating in the show, whether you call into my show, my New York show, or whether you add your comments to the feeds here on Facebook and on YouTube and wherever. I appreciate it. All right. So when I suggest that this is nature's response, nature doesn't respond tit for tat. That's not the way nature works. So it isn't like, okay, man did something, so nature is going to, strike back at man. It doesn't work that way. There are things, because again, it's not just man who does things as I said earlier, there's a constant tension in nature. There's a constant, and I don't even call it struggle, but life is dynamic. It changes. environments change. I mean, the climates do change all by themselves. Animals change, they evolve. I mean, their diets change. And again, weather patterns can shift, water, rises and falls. There's been ice ages, that have happened in the past. So things change. So nature, and when I say nature, I mean all life changes with these things. Animals migrate. Human beings learn how to survive. Oftentimes, the difference between many other creatures that either move to stay warm, or to stay cool, perhaps, they either adapt to their environment or they change where they live. Man does things to almost defy nature. And I don't mean it to criticize man. Look, they dam rivers, but we build homes. We clothe ourselves. We heat our homes. We figure out how to, not just how to grow food, but we alter food. Native people. Corn is a genetically modified food source. Corn would not exist without the hand of man. And that's pretty well established. Now, we didn't, get in there and, in a lab and change its DNA structure, but we found out over time, corn was developed, and it developed different in different environments. We have corn that grows in dry climates, corn that grows in damp climates, cooler climates, shorter cycles, all this stuff. So that's what man does. Man also changes animals. We alter we decide which animals we eat and which ones we don't eat, and it's different from wherever you live. And then we domesticate them. So we change the natural environment of animals. We put them in a pen, and because we put them in a pen, we accumulate animal waste. We actually start to use that waste to fertilize gardens, and so that all sounds great until you see a pig farm spraying liquid pig waste into the air to fertilize a field. So other people are breathing fecal matter. Until you realize that you have to recall romaine lettuce because it is contaminated with E. coli. E. coli isn't naturally occurring on romaine lettuce. It gets there because of waste, animal waste. So there's things that man does almost always with great intentions. If not, one of the great intentions is to make money, whether you think that's a good intention or not. But most of it is about profit. But it's also about security, stability, stabilizing food sources, and human security. I mean, whether it's defense or whether it's securing against the elements. I mean, that's what man does. Dams, rivers, moves the earth. Extends, builds homes right on the coastline. We do all kinds of things. And nature isn't hell-bent like it's some intelligent design creature that says, I'm going to make them pay. It's not what happens. It's not. If that were the case, then man would be the only one that would be the victim. And it would be specific men that would be the victims of nature's wrath. But it's not nature's wrath. Like I said, cancer, COVID-19, they're neither good nor evil. They just are. And they occur because nature enables it to occur. And nature, through its response to environmental conditions, oftentimes affected by man. I'm not blaming man for everything bad that's happened either. But nature responds to much of what man has done. So when we talk about climate change, yes, man's contributing to that. But I'll tell you the other thing man does. Man's pretty good at killing people, and pretty good at trying to manipulate the lives of other men. And I mean mankind, so I don't want this to sound sexist or whatever else, so I apologize for that. But that's what human beings do. They have a tendency to try to manipulate. The word man is in there, to manipulate, right? To control. And bigger than humankind are the natural forces that oftentimes man is pitted against. So when some of the things that happen in nature does have an adverse effect to mankind. Man didn't cause the tsunami that wiped out 250,000 people in 2004, the day after Christmas. But nature did that. Was it an act of God? No. God had no axe to grind with 250,000 people in Indonesia. And for those of you who believe all that, I'm not gonna change your belief in that. But all I'm suggesting, for those of you who are confused or maybe question, just know that nature is benign. It is neither good nor evil. It just is. But to the extent that nature has provided everything that sustains life today, nature's also buried some things. Dinosaurs, gone. There are millions of species that have come and gone. And man could be one of those species. Probably not anytime soon. Man's pretty ingenious, and we figure out ways to survive. But it's not like there's not going to be a cost. I met a guy in New York. He used to come not only listen to my show, but comes to a couple of events, and he wanted to talk to me. And I may have mentioned him on my show before, but he wanted to have this conversation about where mankind is going. And after sitting with him for several hours, I realized that he was trying to get me to the place where I was going to believe in some sort of divine intervention that was going to, change everything. He kept asking me, well, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? I said, the bottom's going to drop out. But this is kind of the kind of thing I've been talking about on my show for years. Whether there's an economic collapse, either climate change could contribute to that, social unrest, global conflicts. Look, there's been 2 wars that have been considered world wars, but I don't know. Some of the conflicts that, have so many people participating in them, these military, I don't know how you only call a world war after the fact, I guess. But there's been all these conflicts over ideologies, democracy against communism, Christianity against Islam, Islam against Judaism, all these people who just kill each other over these belief systems. And they can escalate to the point where it becomes all consuming. We have social unrest within each, every society seems to have a certain level of bias, bigotry, prejudice, racism, nationalism. So there's always the potential for within man's existence for all hell to break loose. I've never even considered a pandemic as one of the contributing factors to that. That's on me for not even factoring that into the mix. But in my conversation with this guy, says things are going to happen, and mankind will pay a price, whether it was warranted or not. Not just the bad people. This isn't like, again, when people talk about the rapture or end of days, it's like, oh, the non-believers are all going to perish, and only the chosen ones are going to be, ascend or whatever else. No, look, believe that if you want. And to all my native brothers and sisters who think, oh, all we got to do is continue ceremony and pray to the Creator, and He's going to take care of us like He always has. No, He hasn't. For one thing, this all-powerful, all-seeing, all-caring, all-loving Creator is not something that's a part of our culture. That's Christianity. That's Judaism. That's Islam. That's not our culture. I'm not saying you can't believe that. People can believe whatever they want to believe. But this isn't about good versus evil. That's a man-made construct. And I've talked about this on the show before. What this is about is when things get out of balance. Is COVID-19, nature's hand on the scale? No, it's not that simple. Scales indicate like justice, all right? It's used for justice. No, this is about maintaining balance. There's something that's out of whack. Something tipped the scales of nature to the point where something else in nature had to happen to not just balance it out, because this kind of balancing thing isn't immediate. It's a slow process, and it's hit or miss. I mean, evolution, look, not every evolutionary change works out for any species, least of all man. I mean, it's great to be bigger and stronger, but eventually, your bone structure doesn't carry you well over 7 feet tall. You don't see a whole lot of 90-year-old 7-footers. So there's certain things that that you lose with some of these changes in human physiology and that kind of thing. And all animals endure. I mean, racehorses that are genetically engineered to run fast, their muscles are sometimes stronger than their bones. And that's why you have this rash of animals that have to be shot at racetracks. I mean, you can't expect every piece of nature to survive the changes, so to speak, whether they're man-made or otherwise. There are species that perish all on their own without man's involvement. But then there's species that are placed in danger by man, whether it's being hunted, whether it was the eagle, the bald eagle, or the spotted owl, or whatever. But nature doesn't go in like with intelligent design and fix a problem. There's a chain of events that happens. COVID-19 is part of that natural chain of events. And we'll survive it. But when I hear a guy like Donald Trump saying, "Oh, we're gonna treat this as a war and we're gonna be victorious and it's gonna be a great victory and we're all gonna be fine," no, we're not all gonna be fine. There's people dying today. We'll get a new death toll tomorrow for every one of the countries in the world. Everybody's not gonna be fine. And part of it's our own ignorance, and part of it is the harsh reality of nature, somewhat responding to our own behavior, our own activity, our own development. But our own arrogance has delayed our response to this. I mean, we're the intelligent species. We knew this was coming for months. This wasn't hidden in 2019. And it was fairly well known, but you have arrogant leaders like the United States president and others who just scoffed at the idea. And that same arrogant leader will stand up and say, "Oh no, we're all going to be fine." And I hear the governor of the state of New York say the same thing. No, we aren't all going to be fine. Some very, very good people, and maybe a few assholes, are going to die because of this disease. The disease is neither good nor evil. It just is. And it doesn't select. This isn't about God's chosen ones making it through. There's probably too much human population on the planet. Is this going to fix that? No, it's not going to fix that. Might put a dent in it. On the same worldometer that I tell you about, that I followed the coronavirus, you can go to the other page that has real-time population. It's a ticker. You can see the population growing. It just tick, 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 tick. Every, a person, it has the people who are dying and the people who are being born. I invite you to go see it. It's kind of scary when you look at it. But I'll tell you, this coronavirus will not reduce the population of the world. It's still growing. It will not reduce the total number. The people will die, but the population growth is still phenomenal. It's still an incredible population growth. I don't know what's the total population. Isn't it like 7.7 billion or something like that? Yeah. But you look at a live feed. It keeps ticking up. It's like 7.7 billion people. And there's some estimates that say, well, will the global population reach 11 billion? Is that the ceiling? We don't know. But I don't see this overtaking in terms of death rate the birth rate. I hope I'm I hope I'm right. You know, this isn't like Thanos snapping and killing half the universe. No, that's not what this is. But this is it is a concern. It is a concern because regardless of where it comes from, you know, whether it's China or, you know, or any place else, we're all being impacted by it. And when I say impacted, yeah, we're not going to work today. You know, we're changing, at least for the time being, how much we interact with each other. But some people were too slow to get there, and frankly, the United States, including New York State, everybody wants to, you know, brag up how assertive Governor Cuomo has been and that kind of stuff. Probably too late to have the real positive, the flattening of the curve issue. There are hospitals right now in the United States that are running out of. They're not running out of respirators yet. They're running out of things like masks and gloves and protective wear. They ain't even got to the tough stuff, the respirators, the ventilators. This is real. And I know people want to say there are some people, Native people who, you know, are included in some of this mix. Well, it doesn't really affect me. We got to figure out how to ride this out. And, you know, most of us, by a large share, will survive this. And so, and that's true. But, you know, some of us are going to lose loved ones. The likelihood that you are not going to lose or know somebody who passes away as a result of this is pretty slim. The likelihood is you will know somebody and in all likelihood care about somebody who gets sick and dies because of this. And, you know, I don't wish this on elderly, and I sure don't wish it. I mean, the one thing that's positive is that it doesn't seem like a lot of little kids are being claimed by this. But the belief that young people can't get it, and when I say young people, I'm 60 now, so anybody younger than 60 is young as far as I'm concerned. But no, there are 40-year-olds who are perishing because of this. And there are people who are getting very, very sick that will survive it, but know that you got hit by something scary. And the mortality rate based on the confirmed cases is still pretty damn high. Some case, you know, in some countries like Italy, it's like 8%. In other countries like the United States, it's about 1.5%. But even at 1.5%, just to remind people, that's 15 times more deadly than the flu. Now, right now, there's 26,000 cases in the United States confirmed with very, very, very limited testing. 180,000 people have been tested. That's a pretty big percentage of the people tested. Now, keep in mind, they're only testing, you know, there's a criterion to get tested. You have to be sick, and you have to also have given some evidence that you were in contact with somebody else who was infected before they even test you. But as this testing increases, we're going to see some dramatic spikes in that number, and we aren't going to know for some time whether we have staved off the spread of this thing with a lot of this shutdown and stuff like that. Now, I'm not saying don't do it. By all means, have limited. I stopped going to New York because I didn't want to go into a place that I thought had a real likelihood of being a hot spot. It wasn't even a hot spot yet when I stopped going. The last week I went to New York, I didn't touch the subway rails. I didn't touch handrails. I opened doors with my elbow because I was already becoming more cognizant. My wife's always terrorizing me because I touch everything. But not the last week I was in New York, I didn't. And then I stopped going. And part of it is, again, realizing that I could have brought that back to my home, to my family, and to my community. So those of you who just think, nah, anything goes, I don't have to worry about this thing, I'm young, it doesn't affect me. It doesn't mean that you can't infect somebody who will infect somebody who you care about. And not just grandma or great grandma. I'm not just talking about the elderly. We need to be responsible to the people who we that we expose ourselves to. And I don't mean expose ourselves to in the way that you're thinking. Don't even go there. But no, we have to be responsible. And that's the way, we hopefully we get through all this. But I want to encourage everybody. Look, in all likelihood, I will do some level of number updates with every show, and unless I get a lot of feedback that says not to, I think it's important that people know what some of the real numbers are. I do use the Worldometer website and a few others. What I actually look at about 4 different websites to get numbers and make sure that they balance out right and that kind of thing. There's an interactive map of Erie County that I think there's 50 cases here in Erie County. But again, there's probably when I say that there's 50 tested and confirmed positive cases in Erie County. There's probably a lot more. So, look, everybody, be safe. Use this time to your advantage. Spend good time with your family. Read a book. Watch TV. I mean, I don't usually watch much television, but I watched quite a bit in the last week. You find some good stuff to watch. There's documentaries on. A lot of these video services are putting up movies that aren't normally available because, frankly, you can't go to the theaters anymore. So use the time wisely. Spend a little bit more time cooking dinner. You don't have to cook something fast. You got more time on your hands. Have conversation and be well and be friendly. Be kind. Help people, but you don't need to help people by having gatherings. Try to be helpful without necessarily getting too intimate with people. Limit your contact. I know I sound like state officials, but at this point, there's not a whole lot else you can do, and this is one of the ways to ride this thing out. So I want to wish people the best. I will continue to do this show. Again, we do this on Saturday and Tuesday night, and then I do my show in New York on Thursday. I do that from my studio here as well. It's a little bit different kind of show. So I encourage you. Again, I want to thank you guys for pushing me over the top with 8,000 members to the group page. I encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to our podcasts. And maybe Jake and I will try to sneak in here and bang on another video pretty soon and get something else on the short form video side. So we'll try to do that as well. I want to thank you for watching. This is John Kane, and this is Let's Talk Native. Yahweh.